Okay then, in this video we'll implement a layer switcher for basemap layers. From the previous video, we have 3 basemaps, right? So now we need a way to switch between the basemaps. In the previous version of Openlayers, for instance, in Openlayers 2, there used to be a built-in layer switcher, which handled all the logic for the switcher for us. In Openlayers 6, we should implement it ourselves. There might be a third-party plugin which can do that for us, but in this video we'll implement our very own switcher logic. Alright, let's do that. First of all, let's go to our code and go to index.html, and here we need to create input elements, alright, for our layer switcher. So in here, for a little bit of layout, for a little bit of responsiveness, we will use Css Grids, alright? So let's create first of all our grid container and our grids, and then we'll assign input elements, and then we will do the logic in the JavaScript. Alright, so let's create first of all grid container. For that, I will create new div container, and I'll give it a class of grid container like this. Alright, then inside this one I will create first of all first grid, and I'll give it a class of grid1 like this. Then here I'll give just and I'll create another div container, and I'll call it sidebar like this. So within this sidebar I will say just base layers like this. Then in here I need my input elements. So the first one is gonna be not text but radio, so like this, radio. Then so I need to give it a name, and you can call it whatever you like, but I'll call it base layer radio button, base layer radio button like this. And in here I will need to give it a value, and remember this value should be the same as in the title. So this one, I'll explain why. So let's just for now grab them one by one. So the first one is OSM standard, this one. And so the first one will be checked and everything else will not be. So like this, checked, and here I'll say OSM standard like this. And for the new line I'll just say this one. And then so in here for the second and the third ones I will have exactly the same except value, and I don't need checked anymore. So, and also I need to change these ones. All right, so let's change the value first of all. So the second one is OSM humanitarian, so I'll paste it in here and I'll give it the name of OSM humanitarian. And then the third one will be cement terrain, so I'll paste it in here and in here as well like this. All right, so now we have our input elements. So now what we need to do is we need to create another grid. So this one is first grid, right? So I need another grid, so that's gonna be grid 2, and within that grid 2 I will include my map. All right, so because I also want my map to be within the grid, so I'll say grid container, so I'll say grid 2 like this. And then here I'll cut this one and paste it in here like this. Okay, so here we have a grid container, and within the first grid I have input elements, and within the second grid I have map. So now let's quickly just do some basic styling. So first of all, I want box sizing to be border box. So very basic styling, so box sizing and then border box. And then here afterwards I need just body, and within the body I don't need any margin or padding. I'll say margin 0. Then padding, and I don't need padding as well, so sorry, I don't need padding either, so I'll set that one to 0. So then grid container like this, container. Then here I'll say display grid, that's for Css Grids. So then grid template columns. So, and I want my input elements, my sidebar, to be 20 view width, and so the map will be 80 view width. All right, so then for the grid, so like this. Then for for the rows, I'll say grid template rows, and in here I want 100% view height, like this. All right, so we are done with the grid container. What we need to do here is just a sidebar, because I want just a little bit of margin on the left side, so I'll say 15 pixels, like this. So very basic styling. So now let's run this one with our live server, and now we have a base layer, and then we have here 3 input elements. So the first one is OpenStreetMap standard, second one is OpenStreetMap humanitarian, and the third one is cement terrain, right? So now if I click into input elements, so they are not functional, right? So my map is not changing in here. So now we need a logic which handles this one, right? So now let's go to our JavaScript file, and at the very end, after this map add layer, I will create first of all comment, and I'll say layer switcher logic for base maps, like this. Then first of all, what I need to do is I need to get those elements in the sidebar, right? So how can I do that? Well, it's pretty easy. I can use query selector all. So I'll say base layer elements, like this, and then document, then query selector all. So then afterwards so here I need to specify CSS selector, right? So I am interested in the sidebar, so I can use that class, right? So I can say dot, so then here, sidebar, like this, right? So then within the sidebar, so I have here 3 input elements, so I am interested in these elements, right? So radio elements. So I can specify, like with this one I can specify direct children. So I'll say input, then here I'll say type radio. So whenever there is a type radio within the sidebar, just grab them. All right, so that's just literal meaning of this CSS selector. All right, so then afterwards I can show that one in the console, just to show you what we are doing. So let's go to console, and in here, as you can see, it's just printing out node list, and this node list is these input elements. So I can show them to you. So this is the first input, second input, third input, right? So now what I need to do is I need to loop through each of them, right? So, and then once I loop through each of them, I need to assign event listener, because I cannot just directly assign event listener to this one. So I need to loop through each of them. So for that one, I can use for let off. So I'll say for, then let, then I will say in here base layer element, this one, without in singular, then off, now it's in plural. All right, then for now I'll just say console log base layer element. So now what it's doing is it's just looping through each elements and then just printing out, as you can see. So this is the first, second, third one. All right, so now we can assign event listener to these base layer element, to each of them. So I'll say base layer element dot add event listener, like this. Now I'll say change event. So whenever there is a change, I'll just run this function, and in this function we'll print out for now just this, and the context of this in here is just function itself. All right, so this one is function. All right, so now if I just click into any of them, it just prints out that element. All right, so now I can use this value. All right, so I can say this dot value to get the value of the element. So in here it's cement terrain, this one is OSM standard. So I can say this dot value. So now this one is humanitarian, this one is terrain, this one is standard. All right, so now I will store that one in a variable, and I'll call that variable. So I'll create let variable, and I'll call base layer element value, like this. Then the second thing I need here is so here I have base layer element value, right? But I am interested in the title, right? So this one. So for that I need base layer group. So I will say here base layer group, and then I need layers from each of from every, I mean every layer in the base layer group has title, right? So I need those titles. Why? Because I will compare those titles with this base layer element value, and if there is a match, I'll say okay, there is a match, and set that one in my map. Otherwise, just ignore. So I'll show that one. So now I have this base layer group. Now I need to get layers. So to get the layers, I can say get layers. I'll show that one in the official website of the Openlayers. So if you go to OL, then layer, then group. So that's a layer group, right? So that we are using. So this one, base layer group, this one, and it belongs to OL layer group, right? So I am inside that OL layer group now. Now if you scroll down, you can have a getter method called get layers, which returns collection. All right, so if you call this one on the layer group, it returns collection and associated layers within that group. All right, so I'm using that one. Now once you get that collection, I need to loop through each of them, and for that I will use this for each, and this for each function accepts 3 arguments. So the first one is element, second one is index, and the third one is array. I'm interested in the element, so I'll show that one in here. So in here I am getting all the layers. Once I get all the layers, I'll say for each. Then I need a callback function, and that callback function accepts 3 arguments. So the first one is element, then index, then array, like this. Then here, for now, what I will do is I'll just print out element. That means layer. Element here is layer. In other words, these ones. First one, second one, third one. All right. So now it should just print out all the layers into the console. If I click, it just prints out all the 3 layers. So this one is OSM standard, as you can see. This one is OSM humanitarian, and this one is Stamen terrain. So that means now I can get title. In other words, this one. So how can I get that one? Well, there is a possibility. If you say get keys, here it just prints out keys associated with each array. Sorry, with each layer. So here we have visible, title, opacity, etc., etc. We are interested in title. So I can say here, I can say get, then here I can say title. So if I click into that one, it just prints out the titles. So the first one is standard, humanitarian, Stamen terrain. And remember, these titles are the same as in here, in the values. So now I need to store this one, and I'll store this one in a variable called base layer title. Base layer title, like this. All right. What I'm doing is just, all I'm doing here is just storing it in a variable. All right. Now I need just comparison. If this base layer title, all right, equals to this one, then I need to set that layer to true. Otherwise, I need to set that layer to non-visible. All right, so I can say element dot set visible, because whenever there is a layer, we can control it by saying dot set visible. All right. Then here I will say base layer title, this one, if it equals to this one, and you know what this one is. If it's equal, then set that layer to true, to visibility of that layer to true, otherwise to false. So now if you click to OpenStreetMap humanitarian, changes it to another layer. So humanitarian is this one. So this one is terrain, this one is humanitarian, and this one is OpenStreetMap standard. All right, so I will explain this one more time, maybe just in another way. So for now, I'll just console log. So I will console log. So I'll base layer title, this one, just to explain you better. So in here, and I will just print out that one. Then the second thing, I would like to print out this one. So I want to print out the values associated with base layer title and base layer element value. So like this. Now if I click to this one, it should print out base layer title and base layer element value. So in the first iteration, base layer title is OSM standard and base layer element value is OSM humanitarian. That means they are not equal, right? So they are false. So in the second iteration, base layer title is OSM humanitarian, base layer element value is humanitarian. That means they are equal. So it should be set to true, right? And the third one is not equal. So that means it should be false, all right? So I am doing it in here, set visible, all right? If they are equal, then it prints out true. If they are not equal, it prints out false. I can show that one, just this false and true. So I'll just print out for now, I'll just print out this one. So for better understanding, so for better explanation. So now just if I click to the second one, so the second one should be true and the rest should be false, as you can see. So the first one is false, second one is true, and the third one is false, all right? So now if I click to the third one, first and second one will be false and the third one will be true. So as you can see, first and second one's false and the third one is true. So again, how I'm getting these values? So I'm just comparing base layer title and base layer element value. And the title is from here and the value is from here, all right? So then I can explain it just in one more way. So I'll just say console log, then element, then get, then here I'll just get the title from the element. So it will just print out 3 times because I have three layers and it's just iterating through each of them, right? So now in here I'll say element get, then here it's gonna be visible. Remember, we have access to that visible as well, all right? So now let's click to this one. As you can see, OpenStreetMap standard set to false, all right? And then OpenStreetMap humanitarian, that has been set to true. And the third one, Stamen terrain, false. So now if I click to the third one, OpenStreetMap standard false, OpenStreetMap humanitarian false, and Stamen terrain to true, right? And I'm setting that visible in here, right, for each of them. Okay, I hope this makes sense. That's it for this video, and I will see you in the next one.